Happening now, we want to welcome our viewers from across North America and around. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good evening. My name is Jason Neifer, and I am the Tech Savvy Administrator for the Northwest Council for Computer Education, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school located in fabulous Missoula, Montana. Good evening from Missoula, Montana, where the weather is beautiful outside tonight. Days of rainy weather, which personally I welcome in the middle of July. It beats Montana on fire in August. And joining me, as always, Wesley Fryer. Wes, how are you this evening?
I am good, and I'm hopeful my bandwidth will be okay. Am I sounding okay, or am I cutting out?
You're sounding great.
Okay.
Wonderful looking background tonight. So you have that nice porch look. You got the festival lights up. It's quite a view.
Yeah. And the sun has gone down now. It is not cool and mild here in Oklahoma City. We were in the 90s. I don't know exactly how hot. We haven't really hit a string of hundreds, but I did return from a great week in Colorado offline at 9,500 feet above sea level, where we had to wear our coats and jackets and got cold and had fires and all kinds of great stuff. And I am the Director of Technology at Cassidy School, a wonderful independent school about 7 minutes from my house here in Northwest Oklahoma City. And I'm excited to talk about Pokemon Go, because looking at the show notes that Jason put together, that I think it's safe to say that will be a significant part of our conversation tonight.
I think so as well. And in fact, now that I think about it, there is one other article that I neglected to put in there that I'd like to do as our top story tonight. So we have story, a lead audio, like a shugung, the top story in the Education Situation Room. So the reason why I mention this is because the 3 or 4 times in the last 2 weeks, and I can't believe I didn't think about throwing this article in. I will throw an article in the show notes. But last week, Evernote announced they would be utilizing a new structure for their pay plan. This is after a lot of restructuring on Evernote's new CEO. And there have been a couple of things I've noticed in the past 6 months, including last week's announcements. The first one is that they're no longer on the iPad or Sketch on Windows anymore. Sketch is now only a Mac OS, Mac OS platform. And for those of you that haven't used Sketch, Sketch is, in my humble opinion, by far the best screen capture and software platform available. It's something that started off kind of felt like it would be a star and emoji adding prospect to photos, and over time, power users, and I know, Wes, you've used Sketch before to much effect. It has a very distinctive but Sketch was no longer available on iOS or Windows. And then the announcements last week was that Evernote, the parent, the Sketch app, is not only increasing the prices for its premium product, it is now limiting Evernote to devices per person on the free plan. So that means if you have a desktop and you have an iPad, you couldn't then use it on your cell access on one of your other 2 devices. This is a big deal for me. I was a pretty consistent Evernote user, but let my membership in January because, frankly, I wasn't using it as much anymore, but I still have a large data archive in Evernote. It's not quite as useful to me at $60 or $70 or $100 a year, which is the price level of the premium price plans. But I also found out quite disturbing to me. The Sketch app on Mac used to be what I thought was the best PDF annotator. You could take it and add lots of great error. This is particularly useful for me in my day job as the assistant director and curriculum guy for the Digital Academy. We'd often send reports to folks that needed it on a PDF report to see where data was located. That is now also a premium only feature. This, in my humble opinion, for this as a platform, frankly, if I were using it every day, I should be paying for it. And in fact, I may chip in to get that Sketch, because after searching for 20 minutes today on my Mac laptop, I wasn't able to find a similar PDF annotator that does for me But I do think that this is the core of the problem with using free products in your classroom in it's one thing to use one-off tools here and there, but you always have to be super cautious that at any time the business model could change and you're suddenly not free anymore. So Wes, to you, I mean, obviously I know that you're a Skitch user. I remember that it was something you were actually utilizing as part of your son's participation in debate. I remember that was something you were kind of pushing against Note as a platform. Have you used it lately, and will this impact you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge user of both. And on a technical note, you were hopefully, I don't know if the bandwidth is at my end or not. There were a couple cutouts that you were doing. So give me a hand signal or something like that if I start to cut out. But okay. Skitch was one of those things at ISTE, 6 or 7 years ago, probably. I think Mark Wagner, we were sitting in the Bloggers Lounge and he just happened to mention it. And it's this life-changing app that literally I use every single day. And I don't know if I can say that for other apps. Evernote is probably, in that boat. Google Docs is as well now. But yeah, I was really bummed. My wife used Skitch a lot in her classroom with her students, iPad 1-to-1, just to take a picture and mark it up, annotate flower petals or parts of some kind of an object, or I don't know. They just did that a whole lot. And if any app developers, I'm sure there's thousands, literally, they're listening to our podcast with bated breath, just waiting to hear the next great idea that we're going to share. I mean, that's an important niche. Of course, Skitch has been a free app, so your point's well taken that when we rely on free apps, these kinds of things happen. But yeah, I haven't felt the pinch on Evernote yet. I think because I'm just using it pretty much on my laptop via the web, and then I primarily use it on my phone. I think I've installed it before. I tend to not like installing extra things that, put stuff up in the menu bar and just, tend to bog things down. And periodically when a new operating system will come out, or I'll be fortunate to be able to get a new machine, that's always nice to have it cleaned off and then just kind of start over, because the more things like that you put on, the slower your machine goes. So I'd heard about the not the price increase, but about the limitation on the numbers of devices. Evernote's one of those things for me that's just become my off-board brain, and I think that's an important thing from a learning and sort of inspiration standpoint. If anybody has heard of Stephen Johnson's book, Where Good Ideas Come From, one of my favorite books of all time. He has a great PBS series. He talks about the Renaissance and the idea of a commonplace book that many writers of the Renaissance, did, and also authors, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, different people over time, having a place to put your ideas, to trust that they're going to be available to you, to get them out of circulation in your brain, and then have them somewhere else that you can go back and refer to, is really a huge thing for productivity as well as just for ideas. So yeah, I'll go to my bandwidth and see if I can ratchet it down here.
I would also say that one of the killer features on Skitch that I have, every time I show it to someone on a Mac, they can't believe how easy this is. And the feature is that when you Skitch image, there's a little box at the bottom of the image that allows you to drag it around into, like, it'll create a up, right? So you can, without even pressing a save button, you can just drag it to your desktop and it creates a file. The other thing it does is it allows you to drag it from the directly into a Google document without cutting or pasting or doing any sort of magic there. And I love that. Spending, Wes, you mentioned before that Google Docs is a daily driver for you. It's a daily driver for me too. I'm constantly doing documentation in Google Docs. I'm constantly working on student site handbooks that involve a lot of screenshots, and the ability to drag that capture window directly into Google Docs without upload this or input that is magic. And I do think I would pay for an app that does that. In fact, I do pay pays for Snagit, which is a wonderful screen capture app that's kind of like Sketch on prednisone, is that it doesn't do that. Like, it doesn't do that drag thing. And so there's a marketplace piece here for someone to make a great screen that does pretty amazing things. By the way, the other thing that I use it almost constantly for is that there's a one-click share to the web that put L in your memory so you can paste it into chat. The gentleman I work with at the Digital Academy that I'm on constant communication with, we use Sketch screenshots the time to show each other things, and that app is magic. And it's probably going to cause me at some point to pay the 50, 70, whatever it is. Like, it's so valuable to me that that's something I would probably do. But I do think, and I'm sure all the Evernote executives are listening to the podcast tonight, but one place where I think there's a real downfall here is that I just can't imagine using this in a classroom anymore, trying to and different devices. And frankly, it counts me out as a free user because I own ridiculous numbers of download Evernote to all those, but trying to manage even 3 devices, which is not an uncommon phenomenon for a tech savvy person, your tablet, your makes it, I think, really challenging. I get they need income model. I was a customer at a probably $60, $70 level, but it would cause me pause before doing that in a classroom.
Yeah. On a technical note, I have adjusted my bandwidth to low bandwidth, so hopefully that's going to be a little better. It also could be my laptop. I know we were kind of blaming your Chromebook a couple weeks ago, possibly. I'm still using this MacBook, which I absolutely love for being on the go and doing just about anything except presenting, which it actually bit me pretty hard at both iPad Palooza and at ISTE. And then, with video conferences, I've done some with Zoom, but this may be my first Hangout, and it may be my last, Google Hangout with the MacBook, because that actually could be the problem with it not being able to keep up with the processor.
Sure. I would say an editor's. Oh, go ahead, Wes.
One other Sketch note is that I mourned the acquisition of Sketch by Evernote, because one of the things they did when they took it over was they eliminated one of my favorite features, if not the favorite feature, which was the direct upload to Flickr. I will wear sackcloth to the EdTech SR podcast if at some point Flickr is sold and is divested or is done away with. If we lose, because I don't know, I have almost 50,000 images on Flickr now, I think. And so Sketch being able to grab a screenshot, put an annotation on, click one button, boom, it's on Flickr, and then readily embedding that on a blog post or doing something else with it. I miss that workflow. It's one of those workflows that I miss and feel less powerful because I don't have it. So it can be a sad thing when a great developer gets snatched up by a larger fish. That was definitely the case with Posterous years ago when Twitter got them, and they just completely died. Although there was some spinoffs and some companies promising similar kinds of functionality. So let's hope we don't have to completely mourn the demise of Sketch, but it is sad to see. And it's gonna cause us to look at other tools and other options. I don't know how I've been using with Google Draw more, and so I don't know what the viability of a screenshot into Google Draw, with a couple shapes. I don't know. It's not going to be Sketch, but that's what we're going to be doing, is looking for alternatives.
Well, and then let's talk about those alternatives for a second. There was, and I tweeted a lot about this last week, or maybe it's 2 weeks ago when the notice came out. Obviously, OneNote is in a great position to kind of take those that are sad of Evernote's demise on multiple devices in the free plan. I will tell you that I find it a little harder to wrap my brain around because I just haven't quite adopted the notebook versus page versus their structure of information is not like Evernote, and that doesn't make it bad. It just makes it means I have to relearn a bit. And I did go through Microsoft to OneNote conversion tool where you can take your Evernote data file and it converts it to OneNote, and that was a successful I should probably put that in the show notes somewhere. But I've also tweeted about it at Tech Savvy Teach quite a bit as part of that process. I will tell you that my original use for Evernote was to just put down stuff that was quick things. That was the best thing I thought about. A place to put things. Both Google Keep, which is the Google note-taking application that plugs into Drive, is a good alternative for that.
Right.
One that's a great alternative is Simple Note, which is something that I only recently started using. It's a free. The reason why I like Simple Note is because it's text only. There is no images, and so what I've used, and by the way, it's got browser extensions too, so you don't. Full use out of it. Actually, email, text, I can. That's something that's very common in my day job, and so I've used Simple Note as a infrastructure for doing that. And so, for those who look, those are excellent alternatives. But the bottom line is that in a free tool world, you using, or if you're using some kind of freemium model, which is free plus features that you pay for, this is the risk you take. Tools. And of course, I wish Evernote the best. I want them to be profitable. I want them to continue to push Sketch because it's still my favorite screen capture tool. You're at risk when you utilize these tools in context of your workflow, whether you're just a knowledge worker that's outside the education world, or you're. So either way, you're taking a risk by putting your stuff in these capsules app-wise.
Agreed.
Okay, Wes, you want to take us to our next story?
I will. I think actually, I hadn't realized that you had put this article in first, and I'd put it in lower, and I deleted it. I said, oh, look, he's already got that. But Ars Technica reported here on July 7th that 10 million Android phones have been infected by all-powerful auto-rooting apps. And so a couple things about this. I know we're going to talk about Pokemon Go, and we'll be talking, among other things, about the security issues and the patch and those kind of things. An essential part of being digitally literate today is keeping your stuff up to date and keeping it patched. And as I read that article, I'm pretty sure that it's some older versions of Android that are susceptible. And so if folks are running the latest versions with new security patches, you shouldn't be susceptible to that. The second thing is thinking about installing things that aren't from the Play Store. I think that article also talked about that danger of installing things from other places. Apple, a number of years ago, created this system where if you are installing an app not from the App Store, it's not from an approved developer, it's a third party, you've got to do a special authorization to allow that. And I think those kinds of safeguards are good. They're kind of like roadside barriers, that companies are trying to put on the road to try to help you if from going too far astray and from having problems. I have personally not experienced a nightmare scenario because of jailbreaking an iOS device, or I have a little bit of Android experience, and I haven't rooted my Android tablet, and I've certainly played around with Hackintoshing netbooks and other kinds of things. But it's really important that we update our devices and that we keep them updated. And that's, one of the biggest reasons why we have huge denial of service attacks, DDoS attacks, is because people are running old versions of computer software. Heaven forbid, I'm sure got people still running Windows XP and maybe even some older systems. And so those are just very prone to hacks. And we're pretty much an entirely iOS-based mobile family. We've just dabbled a little bit in the Android world. And I mentioned a few shows ago, I'd had an airplane experience sitting next to somebody who just about had me talked into going Android. And then, my children threatened revolt if the transition to different iOS devices that came down from parents was interrupted. But anyway, I think security now that I've been a technology director for a year, I mean, I found myself in the few messages that I did send to our entire faculty talking about security more than anything else. I feel responsible for that, right? And so it's just something we got to keep talking about, and we got to keep encouraging people. And there's a interesting separation, I think, that my wife went to a PEO meeting last night, which she's one of the younger women there. It's a group of older ladies, and it's like a service club, and kind of, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but she is now regarded as one of the techie people. And she didn't feel that way when she used to work at our church, but you know, she's been back in the classroom 3 years, their iPad 1-to-1, she's doing all this stuff. And I don't know, we were talking about this last night, how, you know, and I don't know if it's because some people of a certain generation don't necessarily understand technology, or people just like to put a label on you. But anyway, we're using lots of devices, and you know, whatever identity markers you have for technology, it's something that we got to encourage people to be aware of and be very diligent about trying to do with their own devices. And it affects us in schools to the extent that, you know, these devices can be brought on campus, and we got to think about how we segment things and protect things so that the virus that you bring, you know, to my school doesn't affect the rest of us and bring us all down.
Yep. And I would also say that they're in the same way that 10 years ago, very innovative schools were bringing parents in to teach them about Facebook and social media. You know, find the advocates in your school that can teach classes to parents, and also be doing with your school, your students as well. Like if you have folks in your building, whether it's students or teachers or parents, can help on these very issues. We started earlier, Wes, you mentioning that you know, you need to be digitally savvy enough to be able on your phone and know that the update notification is not something you swat away like a fly, that there's something you have to do here. And I couldn't agree with you more. And, you know, I'm an Android user. I get razzed by that by my iOS friends quite a bit. But it's an more open platform than anything that Apple puts out. I have to be on top of that. In fact, one of the reasons why that I utilize a Google Nexus phone, and for those of you unaware of the Android universe, Google puts phone every year. Sometimes they refer to it as a reference design, that they want to put out a phone that they design so that other manufacturers can know what a great phone looks like. The reason why I like the Nexus phone as my daily driver is that Google provides me monthly updates, and in some cases, more regular updates when tools become available on that platform, and other phones don't do that. Now, I would say that Apple's ahead of most manufacturers like Samsung and LG in that way, but you know, I think it pays for you to know that. And unfortunately, the people that should be able to help us, Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile employees, oftentimes don't have or have no economic interest to help you keep your old phone, sell you a newer phone. So extremely well taken point. And you know, you'll see a story like this probably 3 times a week on technical blogs, and chorus of stories deafen you to the real reality, which is you have to be on top of this stuff.
And I appreciate your encouragement as far as the parent side. We brought Carl Hooker to our campus in March and did a really excellent series of presentations for students as well as 2 parent presentations about digital citizenship. But what we really need to do is that regular discussion. And as we get back to school, I think I'm gonna try to do that as far as getting some things scheduled, at least 2 or 3 that we can put in for the semester. We may not catch many parents. We probably won't. You know, everybody is so busy. It's really hard to get people to come face to face for something. You know, but maybe it'll be Pokemon Go, or maybe it'll be, you know, something else. Just it's always a moving target, and I think the bar continues to be elevated as far as the expectation for what people need to be able to know and be able to do, and to be aware of. And it's more than just, you know, what those kids are up to now and what app, you know, they could be doing illicit things on. That's a part of the conversation too. But this part of it, as far as the updates, it's important. And we're not doing a full BYOD. We allow students at our high school, our upper division, to bring devices, but you know, this is the future, the multi-device universe with,
yep,
consumer controlled devices that the IT department does not exclusively control. And so architecting our networks and our access, and then also trying to educate folks about security policies and best practices and all that kind of stuff. It's part of what we need to do. So.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, Wes, where should we go next?
Why don't you want to do the oblique fact? You want to do that now instead of later, or do you want to save it?
Sure, let's do that now. It's a good segue to then what we're kind of Pokemon Go, but that's a great idea. So I'll start.
Okay.
Interesting fact about me and my family. My wife is Allison. She's a philanthropy professional for an environmental nonprofit in Montana, but we don't have kids. We have. We are likely to be parents next year, not in that way, but we're going to have an exchange student for a year from Sweden, not this coming school year, but the next year after.
That is
so
awesome.
Make a precursor trip to Sweden. We've met this student and his family. It's actually when Allison was a student, they had a Swedish exchange student that was a family friend of theirs that came to them, and this is their exchange student's nephew. They'll be coming to stay with us, kind of continuing a family tradition. So we may be parents for 9 months, and they'll come as a high school senior. So it's kind of actually our dream of kids. So we're pretty excited about that fact, and it means that probably sometime in the next year we're going to make a trip, which Allison tells me if I go to Sweden, I will never want to come home. So that's a threat, maybe of the trip, but we're really excited about that. What about you, Wes?
That's awesome. Oh, I'll share just a kind of parenting thing. We have a big transition year coming up with 2 of our 3 kids going to different schools. We had all 3 of them in the public magnet school downtown in Oklahoma City last year, and so our son has graduated, and I wrote one post about this and need to kind of write another one as far as where we are in our journey. But he's going to the Colorado School of Mines, and so Friday we were there for orientation and all kinds of excitement surrounding that, and also it's like every emotion, because, and I'm not intensely, just like crying or something as far as him leaving, but there is an element of sadness and seeing the march of time and how we're getting older and these things, but there's fear and concern as far as the financial side of this and how all these pieces fit together. But it was really my favorite part of this orientation. And last September we had traveled there together, and I learned how he found out about it. He loves Magic. In fact, he had 4 friends over tonight, and I cooked burgers for him, and they were playing this game, Magic, card game. Well, he had read on Reddit about one of the drafts for Magic at School of Mines, and that they had this great club. Anyway, that's how he learned about the school. Now he's interested in engineering and all of these kind of things, but it was through the Magic, subreddit or whatever that he learned about the school. But my favorite part was listening to the students talk, and this really is a school that's not much of a party school. I mean, the kids are very, very serious in terms of their academics. I think they had 33 to 35% female last year, which was an all-time high for them. But it, pretty much everybody there is an engineering major. But it was great to hear the kids talk about their journeys. Of course, some of them came in as a chemical engineer, and that's what they've done all 4 years. And then other people have changed their majors 4 or 5 times. But I didn't realize that students in engineering can get internships even after their freshman year. And there's some with the Department of Defense, even that are here in Oklahoma City, that they pay like $30,000 in the summer. So we're like, you need to check into that. So anyway, it's an exciting journey, and I'm looking forward to having our youngest daughter go to school with me this year at Cassidy, where I'm the director of technology, and we're marching forward with life. So
nice. Let's go.
Yeah. All right. Well, why don't you take us into Pokemon Go and tell us the EdTech Situation Room angle on this whole phenomenon that has so many people going wild around the world.
Well, so it's interesting because this has been a pretty dominant conversation amongst my circles. My offices are on the University of Montana. actually a doctoral candidate at the University of Montana in teaching and learning, with a specific focus on EdTech. And so I had a long conversation with my advisor and the chair of my dissertation committee. A shout out to Dr. Martin Haraji, who is a faithful listener of our program. And he about today, and I started to put some things together that when I was putting links together for tonight's show, I finally came to kind of full circle with what we were talking about. Pokemon Go is an app that's apparently taken the world by storm, and basically it's not a virtual vertical to call it a virtual reality app.
Augmented reality, right?
Yeah, it's an augmented reality app, which means that you don't put any listeners are not going to see my awkward kind of facial gestures here, but you don't put a mask on to play this game by your cell phone screen. And so it takes a picture of what's in front of you and utilizes it in addition to a neighborhood with a very impressive Pokemon theming to it. And basically, it's a game that encourages you to walk to various locations, play the game. And there's a lot of complexity to it if you get deep inside of it, but you can incubate and hatch Pokemons and go to what's referred to as gym to increase your skill. And there's a lot of interesting pieces there to make this, kind of an interesting reality. Why it's taken my interest is because it has gone from being an early app that was kind of soft into the community, and apparently there are millions of players around the world that are taking advantage of this particular application. And so anytime that catches so many people's interest, it's certainly worthy of a discussion inside the education realm. So I have shared some links tonight. You can get those at edtechsr.com, where we post every week show notes so you can see some of the things that we're reading to kind of inform our views on these pieces. But foremost, this looked really familiar to me, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then tonight it struck me, this is just like Google's that was released, I think, in 2012. And Google Ingress was a very popular game. Nerds played it for a long time and had almost this gameplay where you would walk around a neighborhood based on a map that's founded on top of Google Maps, and you could go and capture base side and dark side to take like a sci-fi Star Wars thing and add it to the game. And Pokemon Go is exactly the same thing and company that developed Ingress. And the difference is, and this is where my conversation with Martin today became so interesting, Ingress has been around years and was very popular with nerds for a long time, but this adds the added piece of nostalgia to it, to where Pokemon fans from years ago can kind of relive that with an augmented reality game. And it's quite of an impressive thing. I've only played for it for literally 3 minutes, and I downloaded the game, signed up, put my phone up, and I have a large Android phone. And there was a screen and some dinosaur looking in after my salad days, so I couldn't tell you one thing about Pokemon, but a little clicking around, capturing something that looked like a dinosaur, right? And then it showed me a park in my neighborhood that I could go, that was called a gym, that I could go gather skills. There is a literal gym in my neighborhood that's a YM street that I could go to for additional training. But people are reporting that people are walking 10, 15 looking around for additional Pokemon, energy bites. Now it's where I'm getting in the weeds, right? But this is obviously, this is the first really wide implementation of an augmented reality game that's captured. But there's all these stories about, first, people that some guy got into a car wreck apparently last week because keeping an eye on his Pokemon game, and there was I don't really know if there was a Pokemon in the middle of the street or what it was, but he was Pokemon going at the same time, and apparently got in some kind of accident. People have been mugged where there are prominent names Pokemon, so people sit around waiting for people, apparently staring at their phone to show up to look for the Pokemon. And in a less serious case, restaurants where there are prominent and rare Pokemons located are reporting an uptick in their business, meaning that people are choosing restaurants based on the availability of local Pokemons. So first, Wes, have you installed the app? Are you Pokemon going in your neighborhood?
I'm not. One of the things I don't think you mentioned yet was the Google permissions issue.
Yeah.
One of the issues, I guess when you have any phenomenon that millions of people are going to start playing within a week's time, there's going to be all kinds of things that happen. I mean, in Wyoming, somebody found a dead body when they were searching for a Pokemon. I think that was just an accident that happened. One of the big things involves permissions, and on a tech standpoint, we ought to be aware when we install an app or when we go to a website and log in with Google or Facebook or whatever, and we say, hey, I authorize you to do such and such, what are we authorizing? And I think probably 99.9% or whatever of people, just click through those things and don't even, think twice. But one of the biggest issues of this, and it's kind of amazing that this happened with a noted, app developer, and the profile of this is that by logging in with Google, you gave access completely to your entire Google Drive account, read, write. And if, you were to be hacked or this particular developer was going to do something malicious, I mean, your entire Google Drive universe, could be deleted. I mean, I'm sure Google would help you get it back. And I don't think any of that happened. And the patch actually just came out yesterday where it no longer does that. And both Google took steps to address it, and then the app developer did as well. But yesterday at work, we have something called iTunes Family Sharing set up. And what that means is for our two younger girls who are minors, when they want to install an app, not only because we can just use a shared credit card and be able to manage the purchasing of apps, but whenever they want to install an app, it'll pop up on my phone, my wife's phone, or our computer and say, hey, Rachel wants to install Pokemon Go. And so before I said no, I texted her and said, we're going to wait a little bit, because of the security. And then I said no, and I need to tell her now that it's probably okay for us to do it. So we are not doing it yet. Cautionary tales as far as security. I definitely think, and the profile of Nintendo, I don't know how much their stock price went up, but it was a substantial increase, with the release of this app.
Yeah.
It does kind of show a herd mentality when it comes to the installation of apps. And thankfully, in this case, it appears that security vulnerability was not exploited. But there's a lot of potential, to whether it's a herd mentality or it's just something that a hacker has gotten a hold of that, we can be giving the virtual keys to some really important parts of our lives, AKA all of our Google Docs, or it could be Evernote or whatever. It could be kind of the dark side of single sign-on, right? Because you might allow people into all kinds of things if you're entrusting lots with that one login. So I definitely want to check it out. On that note, I'm excited about Google Expeditions. We talked about that a couple weeks ago when we were actually at ISTE, because we have a bunch of the Google Cardboard glasses to start exploring. I love how this brings together the world and gets us out into the world doing things, and it overlays, GPS with virtual, with gaming, with a lot of different things. And one of those articles also, I think, talked about the founding company was like Keyhole, and this was an original company that worked with Google Earth, doing cool GPS stuff back, not that many years ago. And I love geography. It's one of my favorite things. And so I like that whole nexus and connection. And so seeing this as far as a breakout viral augmented reality game is exciting. And I will also continue to be looking for how students can create those kinds of things, because, I'm a big fan of digital storytelling, of just oral history, of history in general, and the idea of, being able to not only go out into your community or being on a trip and getting to, hear stories about this building or this place or what happened here in history. But now there's going to be, it's like the Jedi Council or the holodeck, hey, let's, see Jean-Luc Picard, appear here, or Yoda is going to be here, or, Buffalo Bill, or, all kinds of possibilities. And thinking about shifting our students again from the consuming seat into the producing seat, and how can we move into that kind of space? I love that. So it's going to be exciting to see how this develops, especially with regard to empowering people to create similar things themselves.
Absolutely. And of course, there's been a ton of extra media on this. And by the way, for those clue about what the heck Pokemon Go is and want a good primer, there is a link in our show notes again at edtechsr.com from Lifehacker about what is Pokemon Go and what why are people so excited about it. But a couple other interesting references that, of course, kind of the EdTech blogosphere has grabbed a hold of this, and there's an interesting article from Idea FM about the 14 reasons why Pokemon Go is the future of learning. And it's a great article. I'd suggest you read it. Although with everything, I think there's a caution to say that, we've been talking about the future of learning quite a bit the last 3 decades. And, it's like every other tool. There's something here, obviously, because it's world by storm, but whether or not it's going to have, whether or not it has the lasting solution to education, which is always my problem, I think it remains to be seen. You might remember, for those of you that remember Second Life, a long time ago, which was a place that for a while had taken the education room by storm. That was supposed to replace all of schools. MOOCs, the big phenomenon, 3 or 4 the future would be only 10 universities would exist and they would offer MOOCs to everyone else. Well, those aren't going to come true, as it turns out. With caution. But the bigger thing that I found that I just absolutely loved was that the Associated Press style guide people that put out update every year to the style guide of how to refer to things. It's mostly related to journalists, but I also buy a study every couple years to help formalize my writing as well. And 2 things actually interesting lately. First of all, they announced a couple weeks ago the internet no longer has a internet is a lower I phenomenon. That's a side note. There's no link there for that, but I've stopped using a capital I on internet. And then also they wanted to tweet there from those folks that are, about what Pokemon Go is. First one is that they say that there's no accent in the official version of Pokemon Go. The plural of Pokemon is Pokemon. And then the best advice ever, use sparingly. However, Pokestop is okay, which is a reference to the game itself. So, I love it. And again, that's the internet, right? No, the AP Style Guide has been around forever, and only in a world where social media exists can get a very breaking news phenomenon and release an authoritative note on the grammar and formal writing that has any sort of authority. So, by the way, I love following AP Style Guide on Twitter, because there are things. It's an interesting commentary on news that takes a kind of, and I'm not a grammarian by any stretch of the imagination. My writing friends, including my wife, can tell you that. But I love. So, make sure that you use Pokemon correctly in your writing.
And one more Pokemon thing, and then maybe we want to transition to your disruptive articles. As they always do, the folks at Common Sense Media did a little review yesterday of Pokemon Go, and on the topic of digital citizenship and, equipping our parents and other folks in our lives with tools to be able to be savvy and make good choices. Common Sense Media, I think, presents some really, balanced reviews of movies, of, video games, of apps, of all kinds of things. And so if that's not part of your repertoire of resources to turn to, it's definitely a good one to add, and that's a good one to show parents. I think they do have a digital citizenship, sort of certification program. We're in the midst, and I need to get the survey, and maybe next week I'll have that as a shout out for people. To do a little survey, because we're wanting to learn more about what schools are doing around digital citizenship, and then develop a specific curriculum that we're going to be utilizing at our school. So kudos to Common Sense, and I think they gave it a 3 out of 5, and some of that just had to do with the security concerns and things like that. But those are things that are being addressed, so perhaps their rating will rise in the coming weeks.
And then I have a couple stories. We can go through this somewhat quickly because it's turning to my regular topic. Like this week in industries that don't. A couple of interesting things. First one, Twitter, which has announced that they will be broadcasting the conventions via their app. Twitter, I think one could argue, is desperately trying to continue to be relevant users relatively quickly. Actually, I had heard somewhere that Pokemon Go had more active users right now than Twitter did, which gives you a sense both of how it's started decreasing a bit in its market share, but more importantly, how impressive Pokemon Go is. But for those of you that have not been keeping track, dabble in media, they have I'm making up words. They have purchased rights to broadcast on games this fall via Twitter. They also tested some of the live sports thing. They actually had some Wimbledon coverage last week via the app, although I never saw any of it. I'm a daily Twitter user, and I never saw any reference to that, so I thought that was kind of interesting to read that after the fact. But evidence that TV, as we knew it in the 80s and 90s, is continuing to evolve different, and the fact that you don't have to turn to NBC or CNN or C-SPAN to get convention coverage, you can just pull it up on an app. To do so, I think, is an impressive thing.
Yep, absolutely. I concur. The other thing I'd say that relates to that is that it's just challenging as a parent as well as an educator thinking about gatekeeping content. I don't want to embarrass her and call her out, but one of our children, we have 2 girls, last night was watching something on YouTube on her phone, and we had a conversation about, whether that was appropriate or not, and trying to equip her to make good choices. And,
Yep.
We actually canceled a subscription. There's this Teen Safe app, which uses your iCloud backups to be able to see text messages that your kids have sent. But the mobile app, all it does is it locks apps. So you could freeze the phone to shut down internet access, or, turn off apps and things like that. I don't know. I'm on a quest for additional tools, not only because it has been and can be helpful, to read some text messages and to be able to have some conversations with our children about those things, but also in the capacity of being a tech director, I want to be savvy about different tools and be able to, give options to parents and things like that. So it is exciting to see the continued fracturization, if that's a word, of media and, niche media and opportunities like Netflix to, be able to binge on Madam Secretary, which my wife is doing kind of again for a second round. But on the other hand, it's also challenging in terms of the gatekeeping of the content and really the huge influence which these platforms have. We've noticed that this summer with our girls. I mean, they're probably as influenced by YouTube and things that they've watched via the internet than almost anything else in their lives. It's been an equal influence. So.
Absolutely. And, along those lines, the other 2 articles aren't as deep, or just kind of bigger pictures. ABC, some web, or actually app-only series. So it's free digital-only shows that you can watch only on a mobile device. I think continuing in this, and the fact that they're developing content that only exists on a mobile device is fairly interesting. And then this one's probably maybe a longer discussion for another episode, because I so the digital citizenship topic we keep going back to, but there's an interesting bit of Pew research that says that while people are overwhelmingly their news from social platforms, they seem to also say they don't trust the news they get from their social platforms, and that tension that topic that we probably should dive a little deeper on. But I know that I pretty rarely go directly to it. The sole exception is I'm a subscriber to the Digital New York Times, and on Sunday with my iPad with a cup of strong coffee, I love to read the Sunday New York. But when it comes to the daily news, I don't even go to local newspapers anymore. I trust entirely social media to point out what's going on, then look up stories in that way.
Let's definitely put this on maybe for next time to talk about, because one of the biggest things we haven't even mentioned are the shootings that's happened of blacks by police, and the killing of those 5 policemen in Dallas, and the roles that social media has played in that, and the iconic images now that have been captured in Baton Rouge and other places, and the ability of folks to be digital witnesses. And almost, it reminds me of, and I'll admit that I didn't read the whole original, but Immanuel Kant, see, I'm going to bring this up to impress my debate friend Jason, had an essay called, I think it was called Perpetual Peace. And the thesis of it was that eventually open democratic governments were going to have, such transparency to what was happening with warfare that the reasoned leaders of these just societies would say, no, we're not going to resolve our differences through violence. And it's caused me to think a lot about that, and we can maybe delve more deeply into that in an upcoming show. But essentially, I think it's really good that we have visibility to some of these things that have been happening in our society, but perhaps they've been hidden, or they just haven't been documented to the point where they're being addressed. I didn't go in and watch any of the live stream deaths of these guys being shot, but but that being said, I'm glad that we're not ignoring them, and I do believe that there are some really big issues that we have in our society, of which I am only partially aware, living as I am as a I guess I'm a middle class white guy. I know I'm a white guy, but we're not super poor. We're not, uber rich, but there are things, and friends that I have that can speak to these kind of things, as an African American, as a Hispanic, as a woman, depending on the shoes that you wear, you just can't know all of the things that people see and experience in their lives. And so anyway, I think that technology is playing a huge role in that right now. And we're having debates about that. And that fits right into your disruptive, title, in terms of the ways that those things are challenging traditional notions of how we get our media, our perceptions of danger and chaos in the world, and also the roles that we have to play, because we can potentially be digital witnesses as well.
Absolutely. And that's what was stunning, particularly about the Minnesota video from last week, is that, and again, we work hard to not make this a political show. I don't think you want to listen to Jason and Wes's political tirades, but the one thing that is true to that is that you can make up a lot of supposing related to what happened or what didn't out of particular tragic situation, but and the video isn't always clear about what the situation was, but it's going to put you in a place you wouldn't be able to understand unless you were really there, and that's extremely powerful. And I hope more people that are oppressed cell phone cameras and broadcast to Facebook. And I think we had mentioned Facebook videos being a pretty interesting tool when it first was released several an earlier episode of this podcast, but the bottom line is that it's pretty amazing that you can press a button, worldwide audience. It's even more impressive than YouTube was when it first allowed this.
And here's an idea, and I think I'm going to try a different laptop, because I've continue to have some difficulty. I'm hoping that our audio will be this pristine, wonderful file, and it'll all be good. But maybe we could think about doing a Facebook Live broadcast. I don't know, though, that we can do that as a 2-camera operation. Anyway, we'll have to explore that. I'm just gonna have to travel to Montana, and we're just gonna have to be face to face again, Jason. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, we'll put together a little studio and live every week, and with impressive lights and stuff. But yeah, I think this is a topic we should little more deeply on. And by the way, if you are teaching social studies or English language arts or communication or speech or any of these, add some advocacy to things, you should be teaching about this stuff, right? Like that's democracy is vastly different in a world. You can have one press button broadcast of your dire situation that you're in, and I think it's an important piece that we have to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. Yep. All right. Well, should we do some Geeks of the Week and get out of here?
Geek of the Week time. I'll go ahead and run first. That happened to me about a year ago, actually. I was recovering from a major surgery. I was very bored in Seattle, and because it looked like a good deal, and it was one of those little 11-inch Lenovo laptops that are becoming somewhat popular, and it was something that I bought it. It's a rugged, wonderful laptop from the rugged standpoint, but I assumed that if I just dropped an SSD or solid state drive into it, no matter what the chip was, it would be fast enough or modern enough to be a super fast laptop. And what I figured out pretty quickly was that it was good for basic tasks or machine. And something that I've been really conscious of in the last year is that there are ways that you can test how fast a laptop is. Like what it feels like, although the feel is important, there are benchmarks you can utilize. And so I dropped a great link in the show notes, again, EdTech, where all of our show notes appear, to something called the Octane benchmark from our good friends at Google. And the Octane benchmark is will allow you to test how fast JavaScript is in your browser. And no benchmark's perfect, and marks to get higher scores than they deserve. What I love about this is that I figured out over time that modern laptops aren't necessarily laptops, and PCs and Macs, which are sometimes hard to compare. When you're buying a higher end Mac, it's not just the pretty, probably also buying an advanced processor as well that you may or may not understand that's the process. And so I would suggest it's a one-click test. Start it on a browser. One of the things I've noticed, for example, is that Chrome OS is way faster than Mac OS or Windows. Cool. Small footprint browser that it feels fast on a slow processor because it is a lot faster by objective measures. But Octane 2 benchmark, it gives you a score, and I run that over different computers now, and I have a pretty good sense on what a fast computer is versus a slow computer is. So I would suggest you do that with your computer at home. You can compare your laptop and your desktop and your school laptop and your home laptop, or your laptop and your spouse, and have an objective way of measuring speed. That's not something that's just a subjective feel. You could actually look at how fast your computer cranks through, which would mean how fast it feels when it's processing information for you to serve you in that context.
Awesome. I will definitely check that out, and I will probably be retiring my little MacBook here from video conferencing after I have that definitive "this sucks" for speed result, which I don't know if that'll prove it or not. But my Geek of the Week is kind of a little just fun one that I learned about from my friend Shannon Force, who probably is not listening, but he always has cool little apps to check out. It's called Hyper. The Twitter handle is Watch Hyper, and Hyper is a crowdsourced video app that will give you, and the iOS app talks about offline, so maybe it'll actually download them, kind of like YouTube Red. I haven't actually tried that part of it, but it'll ask you some questions like, are you interested in tech, science, in pop culture? I don't know, there were like 3 or 4 questions. But I'm very interested in these algorithmic tools that kind of crowdsource things. This isn't doing it in a super personal way, and I don't know that it's going to be kind of learning as a sort of machine learning that as you click I like, you're gonna get more of those kinds of videos. But one of the first ones that I saw was like Call the City, and I'm just a real sucker for time-lapse videos. I mean, I love to watch like clouds going over the mountains and the sun moving, and this one was just all kinds of traffic and cranes and things
Sure.
in the city changing and stuff like that. So anyway, just kind of cool. And if anybody else has any of those sorts of crowdsourced apps, the one that I shared in my BYOD session at ISTE, in addition to Flipboard and Pocket, was Nuzzle, because Nuzzle takes your PLN or your professional learning network that you've created on Twitter or Facebook, and then it says how many of the folks that you follow are liking this article, and it's a really, really powerful tool. I guess maybe I'll drop that in because I'm kind of cheating and doing two. But anyway, check out Hyper, and it is a free video crowdsourcing app to get you entertained and allow you to waste even more time looking at inane videos that you wouldn't otherwise spend your waking moments and heartbeats looking at.
Well, thank goodness, Wes, because, frankly, I don't have enough digital distraction in my life. And in fact, there's an article I'll push to next time from Walt Mossberg Code talking about that we need to come to terms with the over notification in our world. So we'll leave that as a teaser for next time on the technology situation room. So Wes, tell us where we can find you on the internets.
I am W. Fryer on Twitter. My blog is speedofcreativity.org. I have been actually working rather frenetically, getting ready for some iPad media camps. My wife is participating in a 3-day one next week for 3 days using curriculum that I've developed, and I'll be going to Tulsa, Oklahoma, Thursday, Friday next week, and then doing a 3-day here in Oklahoma City the following week. So that is iPad Media Camp on Twitter or iPadMediaCamp.com. And the thing I'm most excited about, I guess, is a matrix of activities and media products that there's like 24 of them, I think, that you can make with your iPad, divided into 4 different categories from sort of simplest to most complex.
Awesome. And my name is Jason, Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the fabulous state virtual school in lovely Missoula, Montana. And I blog at blog.ncc, the Northwest Council for Computer Education, and I'm available on Twitter, where I regularly share links of things that I'm reading, interested in, Tech Savvy Teach. We broadcast most weeks at 8 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Central. We've been changing around platforms lately. We're working on trying to find the best platform from an audio quality standpoint, but you can always find where we're at our Twitter account. EdTech SR is our Twitter account, and you can find us on Stitcher Radio and wherever finer podcasts are aggregated. And you can feel free to join us live. We will a live platform to record this, no matter what we use to record our audio. And we appreciate when you can join us every week, whether it's live or after the fact in podcast broadcast. So feel free to tweet at us. Let us know that you're listening, what you like, what you would like to hear more of, and we appreciate you listening to the EdTech Situation. Have a great week.
Over and out.